The air in the 87th floor conference room of Nexus Capital was so thin and filtered, it felt like a manufactured product. Julian Vance thrived in it. He sat at the head of a monolithic slab of obsidian, his suit a shade of charcoal so dark it seemed to drink the light. Across from him, a man named Michael Peterson, a partner whose firm had been with Nexus since the beginning, was sweating through his collar. "Julian, please," Michael said, his voice straining. 20 years. We built this city together, metaphorically speaking. Julian steepled his fingers, his expression one of serene, analytical calm. "And I appreciate that history, Michael. I truly do. But history is data, and this data indicates a depreciating asset. Your firm's Q2 returns were suboptimal. The market demands efficiency. We're sunsetting our partnership to optimize synergy with a more dynamic portfolio." The corporate jargon was a shield, a scalpel he used to perform amputations without getting any blood on his hands. Michael wasn't a person. He was a suboptimal Q2 return. His 20 years of loyalty were a legacy asset being sunsetted. "You're destroying me," Michael whispered, the fight draining from him. "I'm maximizing shareholder value," Julian corrected him gently, as if explaining a simple math problem. He glanced at his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Michael's car. "The decision is final. My assistant will validate your parking." He left the room without a backward glance, the cold satisfaction of a problem solved settling over him. He felt nothing for Michael. Empathy was a liability in his world, a rounding error in the calculus of power. That evening, he was seated opposite Sloan Riley at a restaurant perched atop the John Hancock Center. Chicago sprawled below them, a glittering circuit board of infinite possibility. Sloan was artfully beautiful, her intelligence as sharp and polished as the diamond on her finger. A gift from him, of course. "The Tokyo deal is close," he said, swirling a deep red Cabernet in his glass. "We'll be in St. Bart's by New Year's." "Wonderful," Sloan said, her smile perfect. "Did you ever think you'd be up here, looking down on everything?" "I never thought I'd be anywhere else," he answered. And he meant it. She tilted her head, a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. "What about before all this, Julian? What was it like? You never talk about your first wife." He deflected with the ease of long practice. "The past is just R&D, Sloan. Some projects get funded, others don't make it to market. The future is where the ROI is." She held his gaze for a moment longer than comfortable. She was smart enough to know it was a deflection, a neatly packaged lie. But she was also smart enough to know that the view from the 95th floor was contingent on not asking too many questions about the foundation. She let it go, turning her attention to the amuse-bouche the waiter had silently placed before them. Julian felt a familiar, hollow victory. He had it all: the power, the money, the beautiful woman who understood the unspoken rules. His life was a meticulously engineered construct, a skyscraper of glass and steel, invulnerable and empty. He was the king of a gilded cage, and until that moment, he had never once considered that the bars were of his own making. The main course arrived, a Wagyu steak that melted on the tongue, a testament to rarity and expense. Julian was regaling Sloan with an anecdote about outmaneuvering a rival hedge fund when his gaze drifted past her, scanning the room with the proprietary air of a man who felt he owned it. And then he saw her. She wasn't a guest. She was staff. She moved between tables with a practiced, weary efficiency, a heavy tray balanced on one hand. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, severe bun, wisps escaping around her temples. Her uniform, a simple black shirt and apron, was neat but undeniably worn. He saw her shoes, black, non-slip, sensible shoes that spoke of long hours on her feet. His mind took a moment to process the image, to reconcile it with his memories. The woman he remembered wore Chanel and argued about postmodern literature. The woman he remembered had a laugh that could fill a room and a fire in her eyes that challenged him, excited him. This woman looked tired. Her smile for the customers was a pale imitation, a strained mask. It was Eliza. The recognition was a physical shock, a system crash. The heavy silver fork clattered from his hand onto the pristine white plate. The sound was like a gunshot in the hushed elegance of the restaurant. The rich Cabernet suddenly tasted like ash in his mouth. The glittering city lights below blurred into a meaningless smear. Not possible. Her? Here? Sloan stopped mid-sentence. Julian? What is it? He couldn't speak. He just stared. And then he saw it. The detail that sent a fissure through the foundations of his world. Beneath the dark apron, there was a gentle, undeniable curve. A roundness at her abdomen that was not part of her slender frame. Pregnant. The word detonated in his mind, obliterating everything else. 1,000 questions, 1,000 emotions he hadn't felt in years, slammed into him at once. Shock, disbelief, a confusing spike of anger, and something else. Something ugly and deep he couldn't name. Guilt. Julian, you're scaring me. Who are you looking at? Sloane's voice was sharp now, cutting through his internal chaos. She followed his gaze. He tried to recover, to reassemble the mask of cool control. It's nothing. I just thought I recognized someone from an old firm. The lie was clumsy, pathetic. He, a man who could dismantle a company with a sentence, could barely form a coherent one. At that moment, as if feeling the weight of his stare, Eliza turned from a table she was clearing. Her eyes swept the room, and for a fraction of a second, they met his. He saw it all in that fleeting connection. A jolt of pure shock, a flash of deep, historic pain, and then, with breathtaking speed, a wall of ice. A cold, deliberate indifference descended over her features. She turned away, her back ramrod straight, and resumed her work as if he didn't exist, as if he were nothing. The dismissal was more profound than any argument they'd ever had. In that single chilling moment, Julian Vance, the master of his universe, felt utterly and completely erased, and the bars of his gilded cage, once invisible, suddenly felt very, very real. Sleep was impossible. The sterile silence of his penthouse on the 76th floor of the St. Regis felt like a tomb. The city lights, usually a symbol of his dominion, seemed to mock him. He paced the marble floors, the image of Eliza's tired face and pregnant form burned into his retinas. At 2 a.m., he broke. He pulled out his phone and dialed the one number that had remained a constant through every iteration of his life. "Ben?" he said when the call was answered, his voice rough. Benjamin Cohen's voice was thick with sleep, but steady. "Jules? It's the middle of the night. What's wrong?" "I need you to find someone," Julian said, the words tumbling out. "Your PI, the best one. Her name is Eliza Vance. Well, Eliza Peterson now, I suppose. I need to know everything. Where she lives, what she's doing. Everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line, heavy with unspoken history. "I saw her tonight, Ben. Working as a waitress, and she's pregnant." Ben sighed, a long, weary sound that traveled through the phone. "All right, Jules. I'll make the call." Then, his voice lost its sleepy edge and became the firm tone of a friend who had earned the right to be blunt. "But I have to say it. I told you, Jules. I told you what you were throwing away. I was there." The words hung in the air, and Julian was suddenly transported back 2 years, not to a bedroom or a restaurant, but to the cold, impersonal conference room of a divorce attorney's office. Eliza sat across the table, her face pale, but her spine rigid. She wasn't crying. He almost wished she would. Crying was a weakness he understood. Her composure was a fortress he couldn't breach. "You'll be well taken care of, Eliza," his lawyer was saying, outlining a generous alimony package. Julian, impatient and eager to close this chapter, interrupted. "Just sign the papers. Take the money. It's more than you could ever earn on your own." Eliza's eyes, which had been fixed on a point on the wall, slowly moved to his. The fire he had once loved was still there, banked low, but burning hot. "I don't want your money, Julian." "Don't be a fool," he sneered, stung by her rejection of the one thing he believed could solve any problem. "You're nothing without me. You gave up your career for me. What are you going to do now?" A small, sad smile touched her lips. It was the most devastating expression he had ever seen. "I'd rather be nothing on my own than everything of yours," she said softly. She picked up the pen, drew a sharp line through the entire alimony section, and signed her name at the bottom. She stood up, looked at him one last time, and walked out of the room, leaving him with a settlement that was financially a victory, but felt, in some inexplicable way, like a total defeat. The memory left him breathless. He had seen her pride as foolishness, her desire for a clean break as an emotional, irrational act. He had never once considered the strength it must have taken. The call from Ben came the next afternoon. Julian was staring out his office window, the city a grey, meaningless sprawl. "Got the report," Ben said, his voice all business. "Eliza Peterson lives in a 2-flat in Logan Square. She's working 2 jobs, the restaurant gig at night, and she does freelance copy editing during the day. No record of a new partner, no one else in her life." The timeline. "It works, Jules. I had the investigator confirm her date of separation from the court records. Give or take. The baby is yours." Julian closed his eyes. The floor of his office, 90 stories in the air, suddenly felt like it was falling away. It was real. A child. His child was growing inside a woman he had systematically broken, a woman who was working herself to exhaustion to survive, because he had told her she was nothing without him. The truth didn't set him free. It trapped him, a prisoner in a past he could no longer dismiss as a failed R&D project. While Julian's world was imploding, Eliza's was a study in quiet resilience. She sat in her small, clean apartment in Logan Square, the comforting aroma of Thai takeout filling the air. Opposite her, her friend Maya spooned green curry onto her plate. The apartment was furnished with second-hand finds and a few cherished pieces from her old life, a testament to her ability to build something beautiful from the rubble. "So you just saw him?" Maya asked, her eyes wide with concern. "With another woman?" Eliza nodded, slowly rubbing her lower back. It was like seeing a ghost, a very well-tailored, expensive ghost. For a second, my heart just stopped. All that pain, it came rushing back. "What are you going to do if he tries to contact you?" Eliza took a deep breath, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "Nothing. He doesn't exist in this world." "This world," she said, gesturing around the cozy room, "is mine. I built it. This baby is mine." Her voice was firm, but Maya could see the fear behind the resolve. "He didn't just break my heart, Maya. He dismantled me. He convinced me my ambitions were silly, that my career was secondary, that my only value was in how brightly I reflected his success. I can't let that man anywhere near my child." "He has a right to know, E," Maya said gently. "He gave up his rights when he sent those texts to other women while I was at home planning our future," Eliza retorted, a flash of the old fire in her eyes. "He gave them up when he called me a parasite to his friends. No, this is my one non-negotiable. He stays away. Meanwhile, Sloan Riley was proving she was far more than a decorative accessory. The image of Julian's shattered composure and the haunted look on the waitress's face had lodged in her mind like a splinter. She was a venture capitalist by training before she'd adopted the life of a professional girlfriend. She knew how to do her research. It didn't take long. A few targeted searches on social media, a discreet call to a friend who was a gossip columnist at Chicago Magazine. The story came together with sickening clarity. Eliza Peterson, the brilliant marketing strategist, Julian Vance's starter wife, whom he kept hidden from his new, glossier world. The woman who had simply vanished after the divorce. The next day, Sloan didn't go to the spa. She went to Julian's office at Nexus Capital. She walked past his assistant without breaking stride and entered his office, closing the heavy glass door behind her. Julian looked up, surprised. "Sloan, what a—" "Don't," she said, her voice calm and cold. She didn't sit down. She stood before his desk, her posture radiating a power he had never seen in her before. "Her name is Eliza. Your ex-wife. The one you told me was an amicable split." I did some digging. She was a VP of marketing at Ogilvy before she met you. She gave it up. For you. Julian's face was a mask of stone. "This is not your concern. It became my concern when you lied to my face while staring at your pregnant, abandoned wife who is working for minimum wage," Sloan said, her voice slicing through his defenses. She walked closer to the desk, leaning forward slightly. "I finally understand you, Julian. I've been watching you, trying to figure out what was missing behind the eyes. And now I know. It's a soul." She shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips that was eerily reminiscent of Eliza's in the lawyer's office. "I looked at her last night, and I saw a dignity you will never be able to buy. You don't want a partner, you want an audience. And you're right, the past is R&D. She straightened up, her decision made. "Consider this my final report. Your character has a fatal design flaw. I'm divesting." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking decisively on the polished concrete floor. The silence she left behind was absolute. He had been left before, but he had always been the one holding the power. This was different. This wasn't a breakup. It was an indictment. Sloan hadn't just left him. She had seen him. And what she saw had made her run. The echo of Sloan's heels faded, leaving a silence in Julian's office that was heavier than any sound. He stared at the glass door she had closed so firmly, the city's skyline reflected in its surface. For the first time, the view didn't feel like a symbol of his success. It felt like a cage. He went home to his penthouse, but the space that was usually a sanctuary of minimalist perfection felt vast and hostile. The designer furniture seemed to mock him with its soulless elegance. He poured a glass of Macallan 25, the amber liquid usually a comforting ritual. Tonight it tasted like water. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The next morning, the consequences began to bleed from his personal life into his professional one. He had a 7 a.m. video conference with a consortium of investors in Tokyo, a crucial final stage negotiation for a 9-figure fund. He was normally invincible in these meetings, his mind a steel trap of facts and figures. Today, his mind was a fog of Eliza's face and Sloan's parting words. "Mr. Vance," one of the investors asked through the large screen, "could you elaborate on the risk mitigation strategy for the emerging market currency fluctuations?" It was a softball question, one he could normally answer in his sleep, but his mind was blank. He saw Eliza wiping down a sticky table. He heard Sloan saying, "A fatal design flaw," he stammered. The fluctuations are, of course, a factor we've factored in." The silence from Tokyo was deafening. His second-in-command, a sharp young woman named Davis jumped in smoothly, salvaging the moment with a flurry of confident, data-driven analysis. But the damage was done. Julian Vance, the infallible Titan, had faltered. The aura of invincibility had vanished. An hour later, the call came from his board chairman, a grizzled old guard financier named Arthur. "Julian, I'm hearing whispers from Tokyo. They're spooked. Said you seemed distracted. Everything all right?" The question was casual, but the underlying message was not. Get your house in order. The fortress was cracking. The one thing he could always rely on, his work, his mind, his power, was failing him. He hung up the phone, a cold dread seeping into his bones. That night, he called Ben again. He was drunk, but it wasn't a belligerent, angry drunk. It was a hollow, defeated one. "She left me, Ben," he slurred, sitting on the floor of his living room, surrounded by glass and steel and emptiness. "Sloan, she saw right through me, called me a fatal design flaw." He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "She's not wrong. Jules, I ruined it all," he continued, the words raw and unfiltered. "Eliza, I broke her. I told her she was nothing. And look at her. She's working 2 jobs, pregnant with my child, and she still has more substance than I do. I have everything, Ben, and I am nothing." There was a long silence. Ben let him sit in the wreckage of his own confession. Then his voice came, firm and clear, not with sympathy, but with a challenge. "Okay, so you're a mess. You're a selfish bastard who blew up his life. You've hit the bottom. Congratulations. Now what? Are you going to sit there and drown in expensive scotch, or are you going to do something about it?" "What can I do?" Julian whispered. "It's too late. It's only too late if you decide it is," Ben said. "But you can't fix this with money or power, Jules. This is an inside job. You need to fix yourself. I'm going to send you a number. It's my therapist, Dr. Sharma. She's tough. She doesn't buy bullshit. Call her." The line was drawn. "Fix yourself, Julian, or you're going to lose everything else. And this time, there will be no one left to blame." Julian stared at the phone after Ben hung up. The number came through a moment later in a text. It felt like a lifeline and a death sentence all at once. For the first time in his life, Julian Vance was completely out of options. He had finally, truly, hit rock bottom. The office of Dr. Anya Sharma was nothing like Julian's world. It was on a quiet street in Lincoln Park, filled with warm wood, soft textiles and books. It smelled of old paper and chamomile tea. It was a room designed for vulnerability, and it made him deeply uncomfortable. "So," Dr. Sharma began, her voice calm and her gaze unnervingly direct, "you say your life has fallen apart. My girlfriend left me. My ex-wife, who I just discovered is pregnant with my child, hates me. My board is questioning my focus," Julian recited, as if listing quarterly losses. "I see," she said, making a note. "You use very passive language. Things are happening to you. Your life has fallen apart. Let's reframe. You made choices that led your girlfriend to leave. You behaved in a way that caused your ex-wife to distrust you." Julian bristled. "That's a bit simplistic." "Is it?" she challenged gently. "You talk about your actions as events that happened. Let's talk about them as choices you made. Tell me about a choice you made that you regret." He resisted, his mind a fortress of justifications. But she waited, her silence more powerful than any question. An image surfaced, unbidden. A dinner party, years ago. Eliza had been excitedly talking about a marketing campaign she'd designed pro bono for a local women's shelter. He remembered cutting her off, laughing to a friend. She has her little hobbies, keeps her busy. He saw the light go out of Eliza's eyes. It was a small moment, a casual cruelty. But seeing it now through this new lens, it felt monstrous. He put his head in his hands. I belittled her, he said, the admission a painful rasp. She was brilliant, and I made her feel small. It was the first crack in the armor. Leaving the session, he felt raw and exposed, but also driven by a desperate need to do something. His first instinct was to use the only tool he knew: money. He went online and ordered the most expensive, technologically advanced baby crib on the market, a snoo, complete with swaddles, white noise machine, and an app. It cost thousands. He had it delivered to Eliza's address. It was, in his mind, a gesture of provision. 2 days later, a text from Eliza appeared on his phone. It was the first time she had initiated contact. The crib is being sent back. 2 delivery men could barely get it up the stairs. It doesn't even fit in the room. This isn't a business acquisition, Julian. This is a baby. My child doesn't need your money. He needs a father. And you don't know how to be one yet. He read the text 10 times. Each word was a precise, painful cut. She was right. He had treated it like a problem to be solved with capital. He had sent an expensive, invasive object into her small, carefully constructed world without a single thought for her reality. He hadn't sent a gift. He had sent a monument to his own ignorance. He sat in his car, the text glowing on his phone screen, and realized the monumental task ahead. It wasn't about making grand gestures. It was about learning a new language, the quiet, patient, and utterly foreign language of care. And he was starting with a vocabulary of 0. After the crib incident, Julian understood he couldn't force his way back into Eliza's life. He had to earn an invitation. He waited a week, a period of agonizing self-restraint, before sending a carefully worded text. You were right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to learn. Would you be willing to meet and talk for a few minutes? In a public place? Your choice. If you say no, I'll understand. He didn't expect a reply. But the next day, his phone buzzed. Humboldt Park, the bench by the lagoon. Tomorrow at 3. Don't be late. He arrived at 2:45. The park was alive with the sounds of a Chicago summer. Children laughing, the distant rhythm of a drum circle. He felt intensely out of place in his tailored slacks and cashmere sweater. When Eliza arrived, punctual to the minute, she looked like she belonged. She wore simple maternity jeans and a soft t-shirt, her pregnancy now prominent and beautiful. She carried herself with a weary strength that made him feel small. Thank you for coming, he said, standing as she approached the bench. She didn't sit. I'm here because I need you to understand something, Julian. This isn't about us getting back together. That ship hasn't just sailed. It sank in a hurricane. I know, he said, his voice quiet. I wanted to apologize, properly, for everything. For the cheating, for the things I said, for making you feel like you had to choose between me and your own life. For not being the man you deserved. He looked her in the eyes. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I am so profoundly sorry. He expected anger or sarcasm. He didn't expect the long, contemplative silence that followed. She studied his face, searching for the familiar manipulations, the hidden agenda. I've heard your apologies before, she said finally. They were always followed by a request. What do you want? Nothing, he said, and it was the truest thing he'd said in years. I don't want anything from you. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to fix the parts of me that are broken. Not for you. For me. But I can't do that without acknowledging the damage I caused. This seemed to land differently. She finally sat on the bench. I have a doctor's appointment next week, an ultrasound. The offer was tentative, a test. If you want to, come. He felt a surge of something so overwhelming it almost knocked him over. Hope. Yes, he said, his voice thick. I'd like that very much. The following week, he found himself in the small, darkened room of an OB-GYN's office. He sat awkwardly in a chair while Eliza lay on the examination table. The technician moved a wand over her belly, and a grainy black and white image appeared on the screen. And then a sound filled the room. A rhythmic, impossibly fast thump, 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 thump. The baby's heartbeat. It was the most real, most powerful sound Julian had ever heard. It cut through all his layers of cynicism and ego. He stared at the flickering image on the screen, the outline of a tiny spine, a perfectly formed head. This wasn't an abstract problem anymore. This was a person, his son, his child. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and unstoppable. They streamed down his face, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide them. He was vaguely aware of the technician saying, "Everything looks perfect, Mom." But his world had shrunk to that screen and that sound. He looked over at Eliza. She was watching him, her own eyes glistening. In that shared, vulnerable moment, watching the flickering image of the life they had created, the ice that had existed between them for so long began to show the first, faint signs of a thaw. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. It was a fragile truce, declared in the presence of a tiny, beating heart. The call came at 3:14 a.m. on a frigid October morning. It wasn't Eliza. It was Maya. "She's in labor. Prentice. She told me not to call you, but you need to be here, Julian. Get here." The drive to the hospital was a blur of panic and adrenaline. He ran through the sterile corridors of Prentice Women's Hospital, his heart pounding in his ears. He found her in a labor and delivery room, her face pale with exhaustion and pain, her hands gripping the bed rails. A nurse was calmly coaching her through a contraction. He hesitated at the door, feeling like an intruder. Eliza's eyes fluttered open and found him. She didn't smile, but she didn't tell him to leave either. It was all the invitation he needed. He went to her side. "I'm here," he whispered, his hand hovering uncertainly over hers. She uncurled her fingers, and he took her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. The hours that followed were a crucible. All the power and control that had defined Julian's life were useless here. He was not in charge. He was a witness, a supporter, a man completely humbled by the raw, primal power of birth. He listened to the nurses. He got Eliza ice chips. He wiped her brow with a cool cloth. When she cried out in pain, he held her hand tighter and murmured encouragements, the words coming from a place of pure instinct he didn't know he possessed. He wasn't a CEO. He was just a man, scared and in awe, trying to help the woman he loved through the hardest work of her life. After what felt like an eternity, after a final, monumental effort from Eliza, the room was suddenly filled with a new sound, the loud, lusty cry of a newborn baby. The doctor smiled. "Congratulations, you have a beautiful baby boy." The nurse cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him on Eliza's chest. She looked down at the tiny, squirming creature, tears of exhaustion and joy streaming down her face. Julian watched them, his own breath caught in his throat, his heart feeling like it was breaking and healing all at once. After a few minutes, Eliza looked at him, her eyes impossibly soft. "Do you want to hold him?" He nodded, unable to speak. She carefully transferred the warm, precious bundle into his arms. He looked down at his son's face, the tiny perfect nose, the wisps of dark hair. The baby, whom they would later name Leo, quieted in his arms, his eyes blinking in the new light. In that moment, holding his son, Julian felt the last of his old, broken self fall away. He looked at Eliza, the warrior who had brought this miracle into the world. "I love you," he said, the words stripped of all artifice, raw and true. "I think I never stopped, but I know I have to earn the right to say that to you again. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it, if you'll let me." Eliza didn't answer with words. She was too tired, but she reached out a hand and rested it on his arm, next to their son. A simple, profound touch. It wasn't a promise of a future together. Not yet. But it was the end of the war. It was the possibility of peace. The 6 months after Leo's birth were not a fairy tale. They were a messy, exhausting, and beautiful reality. Julian learned that redemption wasn't a single dramatic event in a hospital room. It was the relentless, unglamorous work of showing up, day after day. He and Eliza established a fragile co-parenting rhythm. He kept his penthouse, but spent most of his time at her Logan Square apartment. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles at 3 a.m., to walk a colicky baby back and forth across the small living room until his own back ached. There were fights. They weren't the cruel, soul-destroying arguments of their past, but the tense, sleep-deprived squabbles of new parents. At 2 a.m. one night, Leo wouldn't stop crying. "The book I read says we should try letting him self-soothe for 5 minutes, Julian said, his voice strained with exhaustion. "He's not a data point in a book, Julian. He needs his mother," Eliza snapped back, her nerves frayed. "You don't get to just read a manual and think you know everything." The old Julian would have retaliated, would have used his intellect as a weapon. The new Julian took a deep breath. "You're right," he said softly. "I'm sorry. You know him best. What do you need me to do?" The simple act of yielding, of trusting her instincts over his research, was a bigger step than any business deal he had ever closed. Her family remained a cautious presence. Her older brother Mark, a sturdy, no-nonsense contractor, would come over and watch Julian with the undisguised suspicion of a guard dog. "You hurt her once, Vance," Mark said to him one afternoon while Julian was assembling a baby swing. "You get one shot at this. Don't blow it." Julian just nodded, swallowing his pride. "I know," he said. He deserved the scrutiny. He had to earn their trust, too. The most significant change, however, was in Eliza. As Leo began to sleep for longer stretches, a familiar spark returned to her eyes. Julian would find her on her laptop during Leo's naps, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was building something new for herself. She had launched a one-woman marketing consultancy from her dining room table, calling it Phoenix Strategy. She started with small, local clients, her brilliant mind once again engaged with the work she loved. Julian saw her passion reignited, and his first instinct was to throw money at it, offer seed funding, rent her an office. But he stopped himself, remembering the lesson of the crib. Instead of offering money, he offered time. "You have a client call at 2?" he'd say. "Great. I'll take Leo to the park for a few hours. Just text me when you're done." He would bundle Leo up and walk for miles, leaving her the space and silence she needed to rebuild the career he had once asked her to abandon. Watching her succeed on her own terms, seeing her confidence and fire return, was more fulfilling than any 9-figure deal. He wasn't just witnessing her resurrection, he was finally, humbly, helping to clear the runway for her to fly. Leo's first birthday was not held at a lavish hotel or a country club. It was celebrated in the small, grassy backyard of Eliza's 2-flat in Logan Square. The guest list was small: Maya and her husband, Eliza's brother Mark and his family, Ben and his wife, and a few neighbors. The decorations were a string of colourful balloons tied to the fence. Julian, wearing jeans and an apron that said "Grill Sergeant," was in charge of the burgers. Eliza, laughing as she wiped cake frosting off Leo's face, moved through the small crowd with a relaxed grace. They operated as a seamless team, moving around each other with the easy, unspoken rhythm of people who had navigated the trenches together. They didn't need to talk much. A shared glance, a small nod, was enough. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting a golden glow over the yard, Julian watched Eliza. She was explaining something with animated hands to a client on the phone. Her consultancy was thriving, while simultaneously rocking a fussy Leo with her hip. She was powerful, brilliant, and tired all at once. And he had never loved her more. After the last guest had gone home, and a sleeping Leo was tucked into his crib, they stood together in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the happy debris of the party. The air was warm and smelled of cut grass and charcoal. Julian picked up a stray paper plate. Eliza started rinsing a small cup in the sink. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic kiss. It was better than that. It was real. He moved behind her, not to embrace her, but to take the cup from her hand and place it in the dishwasher. His fingers brushed against hers. It was a small, simple touch, but it was filled with the weight of 1,000 shared nights, 1,000 diapers changed, 1,000 quiet apologies. She turned, leaning back against the counter, and looked up at him. Her eyes were clear, her smile was genuine. "We did it," she said softly. "We survived the first year." "You did it," he corrected her. "I just held on for the ride." "No," she said, her voice firm. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "We did it." In her eyes, he saw it all. The memory of the pain, the reality of the struggle, and the steady, quiet light of an earned trust. He covered her hand with his own. This was their new foundation, built not on the shifting sands of passion and power, but on the solid bedrock of shared effort, mutual respect, and a forgiveness that was practiced daily. He knew then that this was the real ROI. This quiet moment in this small kitchen with this incredible woman. It wasn't the explosive, blinding sunrise of a new love. It was something far more beautiful and enduring. It was the slow, steady, and magnificent light of an earned dawn, built together, piece by piece, long after the darkness had passed.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.